This is the Revenue Enhancement Committee meeting on June 19th, 2013. This is Monica Hamill, the chair. Connor Kurtz is here as another board member. Dr. Otto is here. Ms. Goss is here. Mark Boyer is here. And then some public people are here from the public. So what today's meeting is about, I didn't do an agenda actually. What I handed out was these three forms, and basically going through the three forms and talking about just finalizing so that we can recommend to the board the restructuring of the activity fees. So what I did was the first page I had was the activity fee information, and I just wanted to kind of give a little feedback on this form, mainly because it shows what we've been doing in the last 2 years for activity fees. I don't have one for Mike. Mike needs it. I just made these up today. So looking at the activity fees that we've been looking at for the last 2 years is that in sports and band, we've been charging $150 for your first activity. Second activity was $75, and the third activity was no charge. Clubs on that one was $50 for your first club, and the second or third clubs were at no charge. So what I wanted to do was, when I was looking at restructuring, and I gave you the restructuring, it has the yellow and the blue form there. That was the new restructuring that I put together. And I know everyone's pretty much seen this. And taking out the clubs, so each one would be $30. That would be different than the last 2 years where it's been $50 unlimited. Now the restructuring would be $30 per club. And then looking at the categories, you would break it down. Instead of just having the $150 for the first activity and the $75 for the second activity and the third activity no charge, you would then go through and pick which activities you were going to do and what the cost is for each activity and pay accordingly. On this sheet that I did, it was recommended, or at least suggested, by Andrew Basil to maybe go through and kind of highlight, I randomly took people from the participation from 2013, 2012, 2013. Ms. Goss had given me information regarding all the students participating in sports. So I took 16 students. I did take their names out so people didn't know who they were. And I went through, and if you look at this chart, like the first one is for sport number one, we have someone who's doing cross country in the high school. And I took from what they paid 2012-13, what they would pay in 2013-14, and then brought it across to what they would be paying for the year. So this individual had $150 for 2013 for cross country. Then they went to track for $75 in 2012-13. Then they did one activity or one club, which is $50, and it brought their total up to $275 for the year 2012-13.
So that would be this year, you meant?
Yes.
Okay.
So if you just look at what they would be charged for the next year, like 2013-14, was cross country, being with the new structure, would be, instead of $150, would be $130 for their cross country. Track, instead of $75, would be $140. And then the club, if they just remained in one club, it would be $30. So for 2012-13, they paid $275, but for the year 2013-2014, they'll be paying $300. So that actual increase of just $25, that's all they would have to pay. Now they would cap out at $650 for their sports and the other band and all that. They would cap out at $650. So this individual would not even reach the capping point. They would have to pay $25 more next year, unless they decide to take more clubs, and then that money would increase that amount by $30. Or if they decide to do another sport, then they would just pick the sport, and then the cost would go up that way. So if you look at each individual person here, only a few people actually play. There's not that many people that do 3 and 4 sports. So these were just random. And let me see, which one had 3 sports?
Can I ask, do we know how many 3-sport athletes we have?
I can pull it up for you. I have.
No, I mean, we do know that, though.
Yes,
That's, okay.
absolutely.
I don't need to know the number. I was just curious if we knew that number.
I could tell you.
If you can
If you
find
really
it
want to
quick.
know, I can absolutely.
Well, I don't want to interrupt your flow, so go ahead.
No, let me see.
I think the last meeting, initially the number started pretty low, but when we got into it, it was a little bit higher. 30 or so.
Pardon me?
At the last meeting we had here, it came out that we thought it was a pretty low number, like single digits, but then we looked at it further and it was like in the 30 range. So.
I don't get the question. $30?
No. How many individuals are 3-sport athletes?
Oh, I'm going to look it up because there aren't. It's here in this alphabetical.
I mean, it seems like the biggest difference will be that third sport. So if
Here we go.
1 or 2 sports is pretty comparable.
There are 33 students from 7th grade to 12th grade that play 3 sports. 3 sports. There's only, according to this, it looks like one 12th grader actually plays 4 sports. So you're really not looking at that many people who would have the higher amounts. It looks like a 4-sport person on this one. Which one is it here? It looks like they're doing soccer for $150, which they would be paying now $130. They play basketball, which they'd be paying $150 now, and they run track for $140. And they're not in any clubs. So last year they paid $225, where the third sport was free, whereas their expense is going to be $420 for that child. But if they have 2 children, they're probably going to hit the $650 cap, and then they're done. So that's just looking at one child. But most of these, if you look at the difference here, 2012, 2013, if you just take those 16 students, we would have made $3,375. If you look at next year's proposed amounts, we'll make $4,160, with really the difference only being $785 for those 16 students. But then each student pays for what they're going to participate in. And third sports, we're still paying for that, but now they're at least offsetting some of our costs with that third sport rather than getting it for free or at no charge.
Do we have a number in mind of how many? This year was 30. Let's call it 34 students who did 3 or more sports.
Mm-hmm.
Any idea what number we're using as a target for the upcoming year? And we expect the number to decrease.
I won't know that until we actually change the structure. I don't think paying for a whole. I mean, from what I hear from parents, to pay $150 if they do track, $140, which would include a coach, transportation, athletic facilitator, your coordinator for
all the overhead costs.
All the overhead costs. $140 for a whole season is not that much money.
Yeah, I just don't know if
but I don't
the
think
general public is used to looking at it in those terms. Like when I hear a sport and I'm paying for it, I don't stop to think, oh, that makes sense because I'm paying for gas and this and this and that. You know, people just don't think that way. At least I don't think that way. So.
Well, I won't know how many people will drop off, but
that one for 3 sports, it's a little hard to determine, I think.
Well, one thing you can do is you can take a look at the model and see how many of those kids that are participating in 3 sports are seniors, and versus how many are in 11th, 10th, 9th,
right.
8th, 7th grades. And
well,
you get a better sense of whether those students move up, whether they're going to still play 3 sports
right.
or not. I don't know. Historically, maybe Michelle, you can speak to this, where they tend to drop off. When you're in middle school, maybe you do play a lot of sports, but when you get into high school, maybe it just requires so much more out of you, the demands are higher that they tend to, maybe, I don't know if it weans off or if it stays constant. I don't know.
I think it goes both ways because sometimes you'll see where kids start to say, I'm not that, I can't compete at baseball at the high school level anymore, so I'm going to drop it. I'll just focus on something else.
Right.
But I also hear seniors that say, oh, it's my last year. I want to do as much as I can.
Plus, I think at the high school, do we have, Michelle, are there any teams where we actually still do cut? I mean, where you have, so there's another reason. Some kids are good in the middle school. I think they tend to have a bigger roster. And then when they get to the high school level, like I know soccer and basketball become very competitive to get on those teams at the high school level. I guess baseball to a certain degree too.
Well, if you look at the figures that I was given, 7th graders who are playing one sport is 117 7th graders, because that's when we can start sports. So, and then the second sport, there's 39 students that play a second sport in 7th grade, and then there's 4 students that play 3 sports and none that play 4.
You did have that number in here. I apologize. That's right here on this sheet. 3 sport people.
Okay.
I missed it.
Yeah. So when you have it all broken down, like if we look at 12th grade, we have 1 playing 4 sports, 4 playing 3 sports, and actually that group of 12th graders will not graduate because this is last year's. They'll be gone. So we're looking at the 11th graders of last year.
And they are gone.
So you have 105 students playing 1 sport, 39 students playing a second sport, 4 students playing a third sport, and none playing a 4th sport.
Sounds to me like you have on average 4 or 5 kids in each class playing a third sport. That's pretty consistent throughout the 8th grade level. Yes?
Yeah.
That number shouldn't change too much unless they get priced out.
I mean, some people might have to decide, are my kids going to play 4 sports? Are they going to play 3 sports?
For conversation purposes, are you including marching band as a sport?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, it's just, for me, a structure like this, at least parents can look at what they can afford, what they can pay for, and really for $150 to have a coach and all the expenses, I personally wouldn't change my spending habits for $150 when it comes to my kids maybe getting a scholarship. That $150 is
I
worth
did have
it.
a question that just came to my mind, and you apologize if this came up before and I wasn't here. If a parent pays for the activity fee for a sport, let's just say like soccer or baseball, where they're paying it up front, and then ultimately they don't make the team, what happens?
We're gonna we shouldn't even collect the money yet, because the way that hopefully we do it will be electronically, and if we can put some parameters in to where you don't even pay for that until you actually make it, would be a better thing than to anticipate making it and not making it and have to return money.
What did we do that the first time?
In the past, we've, let's just take fall sports, for instance. If the start date for fall sports is August 12th, from that start date, you have 3 weeks to pay. After the 3 weeks, then I would either call home or call the kid down to the office and then get, that due date. There's a due date, 3 weeks.
Would the coach have
if
made
they're
his
getting-
final roster cuts by that time
Correct.
as well? Okay.
So we don't collect any money until we know that they're on the team.
So for a student that might think he or she is on the bubble of getting cut, they probably wouldn't pay until the very last minute.
Correct. And for the most part, people do not pay until the final roster is.
And if they become ineligible academically,
They do not
then they
get
just
a
lose
refund.
that.
They don't
They
get
just lose that money.
Correct.
Okay.
More motivation to study.
No, that's the way it should
Not
be.
only is it participation, it's now financial.
I don't know, week 2 of practice, and then it turns out they get cut 3 days later or whatever. I mean, we started talking about a refund policy that it's going to be revised. Because the way it is now, once you pay, that's it, right? There is no refund.
That's not the way it was set up. My recollection of sitting on the activity committee was you're only paying if you make the team.
Right.
Correct.
Regardless if you paid
If
3
you
days
pay
early.
3 days early and you get cut by the due date or whatever it is, then you shouldn't be getting a refund for that activity.
Most of the time, parents don't pay until that due date.
So,
I mean,
right at-
a majority of them.
Right.
So I just randomly took people. A few of these individuals are band. If you look at the winter percussion, the band, I mean, you can look at, just go down the list. Some people are actually going to pay less than what they paid last year. I have some, I have a couple here that are going to pay less because it's just that's the way it falls. This one person paid last year $200, and if they do the same exact thing, they'll pay $160 next year. And that might allow them to actually do another club.
You asked a question that maybe last meeting, if we could tell how many people fall in that category, that if all things were equal, would pay less this coming school year versus more.
Well, I just took random 16.
Right now, but I'm just wondering, or we weren't able to run it through a model, if you will, say, here's
I didn't run it through the entire model. No, I didn't. I just took random 16 people.
Well, the worst case scenario is now $650.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, I think the question I had asked was, if you took, how many families is it, Michelle, overall?
That are capped or?
Have kids, is it 400 families?
Well, there's
500 families? I know there's 780 some odd kids, right, that play sports?
Well, there's 953.
950 kids. So that translates into how many families? 500 families, something like that?
Well, if I look at the records, this.
So I guess the question is, if you took that, whatever X number of families, and this year, if you took whatever they did this year, and you took that through the new model, are they paying more? How many are paying more and how many are paying less? And maybe, Michelle, you can run that through the model with whatever these new prices are, and just and you can email that result to Monica and the rest of the committee, and even the board, actually. And you can say, okay, well, look, it's going to be 40% are paying less, 60% are paying more. I don't know what the numbers are, but
because I think that would be good, because most people only think I'm going to pay more, but like you say, still here, there are some families who may pay less.
Yeah.
It's nice to know that it's equates to 20% or whatever.
Be interesting. I think that'd be an interesting statistic for the board to know and for families to know. I mean, because if it surprises you, it's probably 80% of the people paying less. I don't think that'd be the case, but
I have 5 here that are going to pay less out of the 16 already. So it is small.
It's a small sample size, but if it's representative, then you're only talking about 30%.
So I mean, so that just gives you an idea. Michelle, in your free time, if you want to run this through.
I can do that.
Well, all you do is it should be pretty simple, Michelle. I mean, if you've got the total number of kids and then what they're currently paying, and then another column would be what the new fees would be, and then just subtract one from the other, and you get the difference. And those that are positive, it's X, and those that are negative, it's Y. And you just count the not negative versus the positive, and you'll have a number real quick.
So if I can summarize here, if I have as a parent in Daniel Boone, if I'm going to enroll in a club, I'm going to pay $30 per. If I'm in Category A sport, I'm paying $150. If I'm in a Category B sport, I'm paying $140. And if I'm in a Category C, I'm paying $130.
Correct.
And the total, if I have a number of children, my cap is $650.
Correct.
I'm just trying to play the role of a parent here to summarize this in my mind.
Individual cap. Right, so someone did, I don't know, 8 activities and 4 sports, total.
Right. The per club would be 30. Whatever clubs they get, it's $30.
You're saying though, if it's just one student and they reach that 650.
Right, that one child,
Yeah.
it's unlikely that they would get the 650. I'm asking, should there be an individual cap for that situation?
That would be the family cap.
That would be the family cap, because if you have 3 kids and the ones that.
One child, I'm thinking one child specifically.
Well, this child here who does 3 sports in one club is going to pay one's $420. So, unless they do a bunch more clubs.
I think, well, I see what you're saying. I don't think there's a scenario, I don't know, but I think if I can follow what you're saying, there's not a scenario where any one individual will ever pay more than $650.
Right.
So it is one and the same.
I'm asking, should there be an individual cap? So should there be something that says your individual cap is $450? I'm just throwing a number out, and the family cap is $650.
Well, how would you?
Yeah, I wouldn't favor that. That's going to be too difficult to monitor. I wouldn't favor that.
I was going to say, because I could see parents saying, well, wait a minute, I've got 3 kids, so cap my kid at whatever the cap is, 200 or whatever, you know, I don't know what it is for each kid. I don't know.
So,
Well, I think a family cap still allows you to control that.
I think it becomes an administrative nightmare when you start coming up with a whole bunch. You just want to try to keep it simple.
well, we were
as
talking
much
about
as
that
possible.
before you got here, about collecting money and all that stuff, and we might want to ask Michelle to comment on that in a minute. But, Monica, would you mind, I think for simplicity purposes, show the change that this does in terms of revenue if you're projecting out?
Well, the revenue projected is, I have a sheet here that Danielle Penza gave me, and all activity fees, including from July, which there wasn't any, till June, which there wasn't any. The total amount, I guess, from August to May
Of
is
2012-13.
correct, is $135,745
So rounded up, $136,000 came in this year.
this year. So the clubs, if you add in the clubs, which I see on this one, it's $167,040. The difference is going to be roughly, what's that, 30?
No, wait a minute. So you're saying that the total for 12-13,
31,000.
when you include the clubs, is 167,000?
Right.
So our
But
total
that's actually going to go up because now that I look at, if each individual club will continue to grow, I just did it as one club. How
I
many?
think what Dr. Odd is asking is the.
What's the all-in this year?
Number, is that all in including clubs?
Yes.
So our total revenue from
Wait,
this
wait, wait,
activity
let me
this year,
double check this for a second.
our activity fee
Activities
revenue,
fees. Well, I have on here, do you know if this includes clubs? Activity fee?
It should,
It
it
should.
should include everything.
Everything.
that we
Okay, so
collected.
130.
so for discussion purposes, we're not going to hold anybody accountable at this moment, but about $167,000 came in this year in revenue. So,
No, 135.
136,
Yeah,
that's clubs, sports,
136,
everything.
yes.
That's all in. Okay, so
That's activities.
what's your projection for next year then? What would this plan?
I'm 167.
Oh, that's the number, okay.
Yeah.
So the difference is about $40,000 more, $30,000
30,
more,
yeah.
29, more or less. So rounding up, 30,000 plus.
And that equates to 30, is that 36% will be funded from parents? Right?
Yes. The 36% on here,
Right, that represents what, you know,
the parents would be covering about 36% of
36%
the
of
cost,
the total cost.
which,
And what was it this year?
because the cost for Peasers and all are going to go up next year. So,
Costs for stipends and things of that nature, for, like, correct me if I'm wrong.
Oh, this is the
It
number
goes
right
up
here,
like
Monica, right? That's your,
yeah.
that's your total
Right.
projection,
Mhm.
okay.
For our activities, so every year, if it's $630,000 this year, it's going to be $667,000 next year, it'll be $700,000 a year after that, and so on and so forth, so as a percentage.
Well, it's increasing 30-some thousand. A lot.
Yeah.
Percentage of something. I know before we played with some target numbers of how much we thought it should be funded, 50-50, was it 75%, now we're at 36%. Was that the number that we were anticipating, or is this?
It was, I mean, I started high because I figured if we're going to have to somehow pay for this, we need to at least get as much money covered.
So the difference between where we were in the proposal before is where we had 4 tiers and whatever the numbers were,
I was as high as 80% parents paying.
now we're down to 30.
Yeah. Because I changed them a lot with people saying, well, that's too high, that's too high. So I,
The difference in money that we're not going to assume this is all works out is coming from the fund balance or from the general fund or some other part of money.
right. I mean, what I would hate to see happen is next year, or if we decide to do nothing and keep everything the same, I don't really want to see this on the table again next year. Because if we can't try to start correcting it now and then we turn around and try to get rid of it next year, then what was the purpose? Like, why? To me, if we're not going to do anything to correct it, then we should just not even put it on the cutting block at all. I just think we keep putting kids through all this turmoil. Every year we're going to cut, we're going to cut, we're going to cut, but then we don't want to turn around and change something to try to bring more money in so that we don't have to constantly do this. Yes.
Let me ask you 3 questions. One is, I'm not sure I understand the point of the result, because this started out 6 months ago trying to make the sports self-sufficient. Now, this is 64% away from self-sufficient. So raising 6 months' work to raise the fees this little bit, does it really accomplish anything? And you just brought up, the second question is, where does this leave us for next year? Or is this going to be another 6-month project next year?
Personally, if we don't try to correct some of it this year, I would say I don't even want to see this on the table next year, because we're not going to try to correct it.
I think what it's doing is you're just keeping pace with the rate of growth of expenses.
So it's not correcting it.
It's not correcting anything, but you're treading water where you are.
Exactly.
As opposed to regressing, getting even further involved. You follow me?
But that being the case, treading water, keeping pace with that $30,000 means next year you've got to figure out how much to raise it to do the same thing.
You still have the same liability. If we're paying $400 and some odd thousand right now of total cost of activity fees, it's going to be $400 and some odd thousand next year. The nut doesn't change. The question really becomes one of, where does the revenue come from to subsidize it? Or we raise taxes? Does it come out of fund balance again? Do we have money from our marketing efforts that can go towards this to help, defray some of that cost? Do you sit there and say, okay, well, for 14, 15, now we're going to raise the activity fees, but it's going to be a little bit more dramatic? There's lots of the same questions that we had this year clearly move forward next year. I think the issue is one of, at least for me as a board member, as I think about it, unless you're going to do something that moves the needle far enough to make it self-sufficient, it may be like just rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic. What's the point? It's still sinking.
That's my question.
Right? But given my experience over the last 6 years working on a school district, I found that you have to start somewhere, a toe in the water, so to speak, in terms of the process, because people resist change so fundamentally in education and in the public that you have to start somewhere with something. And then even if it's gradually moving the needle by inches every year, at least you get where you need to go in the long term. If you do nothing and hope to go from here to here in the short term, everybody will object to that no matter what you do, and you will lose the program altogether. You'll get to a point where you'll have to make the decision, do you have the program or not?
Exactly. And this year, if you remember the conversation, you started out with $600 for some activities, which would startle people. Oh my God, $600. And then we sort of came down to $360 and $240, and then I forget the exact numbers. But the other part of that equation was we were talking about eliminating sports. Are we going to be in that same position next year? And how many years are we going to go through? And I say this to all the board members, and to Bob, and to Dr. Otto, how many years are we going to go through the same thing year after year after year?
Well, I think if we don't try to correct it, at least in miniature steps, and we're just going to decide to keep it, then don't put it on the cutting block to begin with, and figure out other ways to manage the finances. Because I don't think it's fair for the kids. I don't think it's fair for families constantly be in turmoil over this issue. And if we don't take little steps, in a couple more years, we might be able to take some of those stipends and lower them, allowing some more money to come back. But at this point in time, we can't. So we're doing what we can.
That she's hinting that we haven't gotten to yet is we do have a contract with our collective bargaining partners. It comes to an end in 2 years. And there's an opportunity to pull stipends out of that collective bargaining agreement going forward. And by doing that, you've now eliminated hundreds of thousands of dollars in terms of expenses. And as a result of that, this becomes a lot more affordable for the school district and for parents, given the existing structure that we have. So I think as a board, you sit there and say, we're going to raise this incrementally to keep pace with what we have over the next year or two till we get to that threshold, and then the whole dynamic changes, and you can have a discussion about what's a sustainable model going forward for both parents and the students, so that this is, I'm of the same thought process. I don't want this issue on the table year after year after year. It's not fair to the kids. It's not fair to the public. It's not fair to the board members to have to do that. And so you do something that's just going to help get us through the next 2 years, where we now have an opportunity to really change the model that works for everyone.
And when I look at the structure that we've had for the last couple of years, this activity fee structure where the third activity is free, I mean, to me it's like, okay, I want to go into the store and I want to buy cake, ice cream, and cookies. But I really only want to pay for the cake and ice cream. Can I have the cookies free? Well, I don't get them free. I have to pay for them. So I don't feel that this works. Why should, if you want all this stuff, why not at least pay for some of it? I mean, I might have a coupon to get a discount on it, but I still have to pay for all 3 items. I don't get anything free. And that, for now, just offsets what I'm just trying to offset what's going on, and hopefully in 2 years we can make a bigger difference. But I don't think it's fair to keep putting this on the table.
The third question I had, there was a lot of discussion back in the fall about contracting out to Amity AC or other organizations. Did that just fade away, or?
After discussing it with Ms. Goss, with even the president of the sports boosters, just working through the whole process, part of the problem with kind of taking the students in middle school and giving them to another organization is that there's some disconnect in when you try to get the students back into the school system. The coaching, my kids went to Amity AC. My kids have done other things with other organizations, and they use volunteers. Volunteers can be very good, but I tell you, the coaches that we have on the middle school level are excellent. And they have brought the kids through the middle school, and just like when we thought about getting rid of elementary band, part of that is to keep it together, because that's our feeding of the high school. If we don't train them the way we want them to get through and learn what they need to learn, when they get to high school, they're going to be lost. So to have these kids, I think, plucked out and taken someplace else and trained in a manner in which our coaches may have to retrain them again, I don't think it's going to be beneficial for the students, and I don't think it's going to be beneficial for our coaching, and I think it will impact when kids want to go to other schools, like once they graduate and go to college. I really think those young years are important for them to get the proper training. I don't know if every volunteer coach has the ability to train the kids the way that I've seen some of our kids train, both in that elementary stage and middle school. And I mean, I don't know what Mrs. Goss's thoughts are completely, but I just think that if we do that, we're going to ruin our high school sports, and we're not going to be as competitive, and our kids aren't going to have the scholarships they need.
I was just wondering, because I know it was talked about and then it just disappeared.
Well,
Yeah, I'm
go
sorry.
ahead.
We also did some research on school districts that did that and who are now not doing it anymore because it was just more of a mess than it was good for the district. So I think that was,
What were some of the major, headaches or heartache that came with that?
Well, a big one was with just the funding of NPIAA and Title IX, because if you have one team getting fundraising and getting more money than another team, that's not, they're coming out with a new report come October that you have to make sure that everything is on.
So
There has to be gender equity.
So if you had a
balance.
baseball team and a girls softball team, one was more effective in fundraising, the district or something would have to make up the balance so they were equal? Is that
Correct.
Okay.
Is basically what it comes to.
Okay.
Make up the balance, or would it have to be shared?
one way or another, there have to be
I'm
equity.
just saying, the school district shouldn't be on the hook to make up a
Yes.
shortage from somebody not
Yeah,
fundraising.
it's a third-party community organization, that has nothing to do with the district.
Well, doesn't the district oversee
Yeah,
everything
the
that
district's
happens? We're
responsible
the
for it.
umbrella. Everything goes into the
So-
high school.
But that's what I'm
That was-
saying.
So
That was
they would
another-
almost, they should have because they are linked for Title IX, they probably should have
Should
going
be
out and
pooled.
fundraise together, then pooled that money and split it between the two groups instead of having separate, it sounds like. And I don't know what the facts are, it just sounds,
That was another reason.
Part of there was another disconnect in that because we're a PIAA affiliated school, the PIAA, we had conversations with them, basically, to paraphrase, said, we don't care who runs your sports program. Your high school principal still is the final responsible person for the building principal. At the middle school, it's the middle school principal, and at the high school, it's the high school principal, for making all final determinations about in other words, any problems or issues, they're going to fall to the high school principal and by proxy to the superintendent and then by connection to the board. So it's always going to come back to the district.
And there was just a lot of disconnect with those groups, like their community group and their school district, because the school district is making all the decisions, but the community group was paying all the bills. So they then
That's
in
that's a
return
flashpoint for conflict.
felt that they should be making the decisions where that's not
I mean, the coaching decision.
correct.
Well, it's like the old taxation without representation. They're putting the money in and then they have no say. You can see how that's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, but they were trying to solve a problem. I mean, that's, you would think.
Understood.
Yeah.
I mean, we currently have we have a blended model here. We have 4 or 5 sports that are clubs, that are, where the fundraising and all that kind of stuff takes place at the clinical level. We don't have anything to do with that. We do have oversight on the coaches and scheduling and everything else, but we don't have any control over the fundraising and everything else that's associated with sports, and the sports have been successful.
For like lacrosse.
Lacrosse, swimming,
tennis.
hockey, tennis, so
Hockey's not actually,
it's not a club.
not for the district. We only have 3,
Three.
girls and boys tennis and
I mean, I think the reason why we kind of walked away from Amity AC was, I think the offer from Amity AC, as I understood it, was, if it's gonna go, we'll step up and the program. We'd rather have something than nothing. So if you guys can figure out some other way to make this work, we'd rather see you guys make it work. And so that's really what.
I mean, even to change the subject, because this is not just about sports, the band is involved and things like that. And, just recently we had, I know Mike is part of the band, and their band didn't seem to be doing as well. I know you're happy that there might be a change because you're bringing back someone who did a really good job, or supposedly. So if you were to then go back and get someone who wasn't as good, would you want to keep going? Would you want to give other people in the outside community
No, that's a good point.
control?
If you're going to pay the money, you want the person that is going to do the best job for you, obviously.
So I just don't see why. This to me is not all about sports. It's about the entire school coming together and working together and making our activities work. And I just, like I said, if we can't change things incrementally, then, I just don't want to see this every year on the board and having students, parents, and everybody up in an uproar over something that, well, if we don't change it, then just we'll figure out a way to make it work. So that's, so it may just be a little bit of increase, but we still have a couple years to see what could happen.
So let me bring it full circle. What's the committee's recommendation to put on the board agenda for Monday? What you have here?
We need to get a response on what's been floated around now for months. So I think my recommendation would be to put what she has down here on the agenda and vote yes or no.
That's what I need.
That's what my recommendation would be too.
Okay.
Any other questions, comments?
We had wanted to discuss a little bit about assuming, I'll just be on the positive and assume a an affirmative vote Monday, we will need to ramp up very quickly a collection process for this. We had discussed that.
Regardless.
Yeah.
Well, exactly. Well, we would wanted to modify that anyway, so that's true. But given that we would also have the double thing of advertising a new structure, Michelle, you weren't here yet, and Mark was part of the conversation. We were just brainstorming a little bit. We didn't come up with any decisions about a method of collecting this money that more centralizes it. Do you have any thoughts on how it would make your life easier for the collection? Because I know we've been talking about bags of cash and money in drawers and things like that, so we're trying to avoid that.
Yeah, and the way that it's done, I mean, it works because we've just, for the last 2 years, have been doing it that way. So the first year was kind of
Well, necessity is the mother of invention, but we're trying to make your
And then
life easier.
The second year was better. Ultimately, it would be nice to be able for a parent to go online and pay with their credit card or whatever, like they do with lunch. If that's not possible, I don't really.
Yeah, I have a question. Where does that lunch money go when parents pay online? Does that go to the cafeteria? Does it go to the business office? Where does that go?
Goes right into our designated checking account for the CAD.
Are any parents who don't use that online method?
Well, that's what
Yes.
that's where we're getting with it.
Well, what percentage or how many actually pay other than online?
I can't give you a percentage right now, but you can pay using the credit card for your meals, or if you give your child a check or cash, give it right to the cafeteria.
Right, but so you don't know what
Percentage-wise, I mean, I would have to calculate. I mean, the deposits are.
But what we're trying to get away from is, or if somebody has the $650 cap, and they walk in, or they have one student here is 425, whatever. But somebody doesn't come in with 4 100s and a 20 and a 5. We don't like cash.
Yeah, I went with my 7th grader walk.
Exactly.
$300.
Right.
From someone who pair of shoes.
Yeah.
So I think, I don't know that we have to decide it here, but I think we administratively need to, and Mark, you had some thoughts on how to do that. And Goose.
My concern would be that right now the way it's done is that I know every kid who pays and who doesn't pay. So if they haven't paid, then I can go after them and get the money. Because if they don't pay by the deadline, then they can't participate until they pay. So however we do it, it would just be important that it's tracked extremely well so that no one...
Well, if Mark can generate a report and give the report to you, you don't have to deal with any of the money. You just have to have the report saying that they paid. It's not.
Well, I mean, would it be possible to give Goose access to it so she can just pull it up when she wants to see what it looks like, or she has to wait
Yeah,
for
she
the
could,
report?
to the online part, yes, you'd be able to have access.
Well, it'd be like a portal.
Yeah,
So what would
It's like a
happen?
portal, it's a
You would be able to
website.
see
You just have
everything.
a login and username to a website.
What would happen with people who still pay with checks, though? They would have to come in or send it in with their child? Is that?
Well, what we kind of suggested was to figure out if administratively we can have one area to have that happen, and maybe at the business office would be better to ever have everything filtered through the business office rather than you getting it, Kathy getting it, all of the different hands it has to go through. If there was one centralized place in the business office where it should be done, rather than.
I mean, does that make
piecemeal.
sense to you? I know we're kind of hitting you with this, and it's a little bit of a brainstorm, but we really do need to.
Yeah, it makes sense to me that's a lot of money that's going through that Kathy has to deposit and send out to the district office every day. Like, it's a lot of work. But if there's an easier way to do it,
Hey, Mark,
I'm all
what's
for
the
it.
name of the website?
Meals Plus.
Meals Plus?
Or actually, it's myschoolmoney.com.
Oh, it's the same thing as the lunch.
Yes, exactly the same
So
thing as lunch.
did it recently change back? I got an email saying that it's changed it back to my lunch account. I don't know if it was changed.
No, not that I'm aware of.
That's all the same.
Looks like you better look, Mark.
I know.
Something's slipping out
I figured
in the
I figured
public.
out in September.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's wherever the site is. It would be the same site. We can customize categories to that site. So, I mean, I would obviously just right now I would have to create an item for each club, and then the amount $30. I'm still trying to process how I would come up with the cap. Like essentially, because if you're paying $30 for a club, obviously that's in the beginning of the year. But as you're going along and paying per sport in a certain window of time that you set up, I would have to kind of figure out, well, what happens if someone reaches the cap, they didn't realize it, do we issue a refund then? Are we responsible for tracking the cap?
Yes.
Is there a way?
Yes.
Is
So
there-
we're responsible for tracking the cap?
Absolutely.
I disagree. I think that's
I think it's the parents'
responsibility.
responsibility to track the cap.
Definitely. I mean, I'm sure when my two daughters were in and I hit the cap 2 years ago, I knew exactly where I was.
Yeah, but
And that was I thought it was my responsibility to keep track of where we were.
what if they're living in two different households? I know students that live some days here and some days there. What if one parent sends them money and they can't?
People running
Mark,
cold.
should you be able to set up a debit, of $650 in there as a limit? And as people pay into it, you approach that balance, outstanding balance for sports, and when you hit the balance, it refuses to accept any more funds? Or it shows a parent at least your balance is.
Right,
But if
right.
you have multiple children, they may not have the same name. Because I know families that are blended families that have
Right.
different names, but they're part of the same family.
Is it one log on per family?
Yeah, and
You can
how
probably
would
log on
you?
per family.
Yeah, how would you link? The different families.
I would need to dive into that part.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's something
It's gotta be a way to do
administratively.
it
I mean, I didn't mean to make this a problem-solving
I
session.
know
Just-
that's
these
a good
schools
one. It's a good
already-
problem to throw
But it
out
is-
there
it's-
because
it's-
it's something we need to know.
It's something we have to figure out.
So you ought to be able to define what the constraints are, and then people just log in and tells you what your balance is. So what's going to happen is Michelle will say, hey, look, I've got these number of kids signed up for these sports, right? And then all of a sudden for the parent, there's a debit balance that they have to pay, right? And so now the parent knows, well, I've got this amount of money outstanding, and that's the report that she's getting. That, for these families, there's money that has to be owed, right? And that's the report she's getting every week or every 2 weeks. And those are the kids or the families that she has to go after for collection. Or the district office has to go after for collection. She just tells them they can't play.
Right.
Now, Mark,
Mm-hmm.
with my school lunch, it's a $1.95 transaction fee. Is that the cost of doing that is absorbed by the parent?
Yes.
So there's no cost to the district?
That's correct.
Okay, so when they collect money, they're sending you, say they deposit $100, they're sending the district $100,
That's correct.
$1.95 goes to them.
With the other, which was paid schools, there would be a 3.5% transaction fee that essentially would be the district's responsibility to pay.
Mhm.
So that was one of the positives of Meals Plus was the parent's responsible for the $1.95 transaction.
Okay.
I think we might have already talked about this, but is there going to be a way that they only pay for that current sport?
Yes, that's how we intend to set that.
Okay. Because if they would pay for a fall sport, winter sport, and then they ended up not playing that winter sport.
Correct, or they got hurt or injured or whatever.
Well, I think you're going to have to
There's
collaborate.
ways to do that.
The two of you are going to have to collaborate on building this model when we get it together, because you're on the ground and we're trying to centralize this a little more, so we got to meld that together and make sure it works.
This is Gus. Is there any other money that's being collected outside of the fees for an individual sport?
You
For, like,
mean-
You mean by the
equipment,
coaches or?
equipment or other supplies that they need that the kids have to pay into
Yeah, I
the
mean-
sport for?
Yeah, the kids have to pay for their
Uniforms, spikes.
lacrosse. Like for lacrosse, they pay for all their equipment. Cheerleading, they pay for everything, their pom-poms, their bloomers.
So I guess the first question that would come to mind then is this a vehicle that we could use to help the coaches manage that, or is that get too far into the weeds with that?
I would think that would be,
Too
yeah.
Too
I mean,
Yeah.
just my initial thought would be yes, but I don't.
I think it actually.
Not to contradict, I mean, the Meals Plus or my school lunch can be set up, you can charge anything.
That's
You want to charge a yearbook. You want to
Anything,
charge
school supplies, whatever.
It comes down to
should be
just
able-
making sure that when we get the money and the money's, and it's our responsibility, and not trying to push responsibility. When the money comes in, we're making sure that it's being counted in the right direction, the right bucket it needs to go into.
No, it's just some of the, from listening to the joint operating committee for the sports and, the music, when they get together and they talk, one of the pains that they have is collecting monies for the different things and trying to keep track of that. And is that something that, since it's no cost to the district, if, while they could pay for their lunch, they could pay for their activity, could they also click a link to pay for, whatever they would have to pay for the music program, pay for whatever they need to do for their lacrosse, equipment or what have you?
Well, who is that? But I guess the question would be, if you're, let's say for lacrosse, and you're buying your own lacrosse stick, and they're giving us the money, do we have to go, are we the purchasing agent then?
They
Or?
for equipment wise, the parents just go out and buy that. Like, that's not money that's coming back to the coach and the coaches.
Oh, see,
going
that's
out
what
the
There
that's
is
what I was
money,
talking
right.
about, things
There-
that
I
the
mean,
district is collecting for.
As far as clubs, they're like DBYEA, for instance, you pay the activity fee to the district, but then there's a $10 fee dues for that club, which may be beneficial to have that part, to help that club advisor collect their dues for their club.
Yeah, we don't want advisors collecting funds. I mean, that's what we're trying to move away from. Coaches, advisors, and you spending your time handling cash. What we want is a system set up that if my kid is in DBYA, there's a $30 or $50 fee for the club, and then I have an extra dues of $10. And when I log into, as a parent, I log into this meals plan, it's going to say,
30 fee, $10 dues, $40 total.
Basil, in DBYEA, $60, debit, and then, football, $150 debit, and blah, 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 debit. And at the bottom, I see what the total amount is that I owe the school district, and I swipe my card, and it gets paid. And then it's their job then to track the payment and drop the money in the right buckets in terms of our accounts, and then send a report to you saying,
Here it is.
so-and-so's paid, or sending it to the advisor of that club, so-and-so's paid. You follow me? Mm-hmm. And so I think to Mr. Wolf's point, this is an excellent tool for handling all those issues, I think, and making the jobs and the lives of our administrators a lot easier.
What about the funds that we use for fundraising? Because I know we do a fundraiser and we give the money to Kathy, and then Kathy then puts it into our account. Is there any way that we could just, instead of take that all out and put our funds directly here?
Those are the sports boosters.
Those are the
That
sports
money goes
boosters.
to- Correct.
Each individual team does fundraisers also, that money goes to the coach.
Right.
That goes into the sports boosters.
But there's a difference between booster clubs fees and, because booster clubs, as I know, they're 501c3s. They have all their own books.
Right, but individual sports do one that's not always affiliated with
The
sports boosters.
It is
Right, well.
'Cause they're-
Well, if they're not 501c3s though, that's
If you wanna get
a little fuzzy
for
area.
Basketball, and whoever organizes it, a parent, a coach, says, okay, I got a deal, we're gonna go to JD Sport, it's $15 a shirt, turn your money and bring your money into practice. That they don't hand that money to some of the sports boosters, they collect that money and then they go to JD Sport and give them money. I don't think it always,
Yeah.
They
the
go,
coach or whatever, I don't think it always goes to sports boosters.
it come, when the coach collects money for something like that, it comes, they have to do a deposit slip to Kathy, and then she then deposits that money into the sports boosters account, and then writes a check out of the sports boosters account, and then it goes to, we send it to JD Sport.
But it's an individual account, like their
Correct.
individual
Like
accounts.
boys basketball has their own account.
Right, yeah, right,
Yeah,
another
right.
account.
I think it's number 63 individual accounts that are controlled by boosters. And for whatever reason, our secretary is the one who's got check signing, things on it. So the money's coming in and going out. So somebody's keeping track of it, but I think what we're trying to go, should that be the school district?
After the
Yeah,
game.
or through our system, you know,
That seems a little odd.
My thought was, you know, like one of the things the music boosters are struggling with is, you know, tracking the money that the kids have to pay for their equipment or some of their other expenses, and that doesn't have anything to do with the district. It's normally people are dropping off cash, sending checks, and they were looking at, you know, using a vehicle like PayPal or something like that, which has a, you know, 3-point-something% transaction fee deducted from what you pay. It's not passed on to the payer. Is that something, if that could be just linked to their account, so money that's directed to them goes to them with whatever financial.
I think with the boosters, I don't think that would work.
Okay, well, I
no.
mean, that's an
Yeah.
okay answer.
Yeah.
That's a question that's naturally going to come.
I want to ask, this is a bigger question. I'm sitting here mulling this, but I need to say it. Is there an intermingling of sports booster money with district money?
No.
There's not.
No.
But there is an intermingling of duties. So you have coaches.
Something doesn't sound right here.
No, what you have going on is you have coaches and directors or whatever of
I get it.
sports and,
Right.
and music programs who are collecting money for the accessories, right?
They're selling candy bars or something.
Whatever it is. I mean, whether you're buying shoes or you're buying, whatever it is, equipment or paying for a trip, those monies are coming in. They're being collected by the coach or parent or whoever.
Advisor.
Turned into
No, parent.
Parent.
Usually a
being
parent.
turned into our athletic director's secretary, who is then depositing those monies on behalf of the boosters and then dispersing those monies on behalf of the boosters. So we have administrative staff working for the booster organization. I don't know about the music, but certainly the sport.
My elbow gets funny when I hear that.
And so, I'm not. That's the methodology that's been
Understood.
in place for years. And should that be going on? Is
There's a bigger question
yeah,
than tonight.
there is no
Okay.
commingling of funds between district
All right.
accounts and booster accounts.
So it's a question of the personnel involved.
Correct.
That needs further review.
Yeah. No, I think, Mr. Wolf. I mean, I know I keep toting this. There is this site called www.pennyschools.com that school districts, PASMA endorsed, the school districts use it. You go on. It's a free service for the business.
It's like PayPal.
Yeah, it's like PayPal.
Mm-hmm.
The fee that comes in, you can charge to the consumer. So
Right.
you would
No,
pay,
it's going to be separate. They're going to have to set it up separate from what's going on in the district.
but that may be a vehicle that they can use,
Yeah.
alternatively
Yeah,
to
definitely.
PayPal.
I was just looking at a one-stop shop. I have it on a shortcut on my desktop. I get the notification. My daughters love, look and see what she ate that week that made her low. All right, add another $40 to the account. I know it's $41.95 because it's a $1.95 transaction. Makes it so much easier.
Yeah.
And if I'm going to pay for a uniform or whatever that's going to come down the pike, and I can write that check, wait for them for 3 weeks to cash it, I can just knock that out right there, and that's good. Well, I think that's fine. Separate is okay.
I mean, I guess the question that comes to my mind is, either the school district should be managing this in and out, or it should.
You mean the sports boosters part?
Yeah. So either coaches should be collecting the money and it comes into us and then we're dispersing it. And if that's the case, then why aren't we controlling that whole process instead of the booster organization?
That's my concern. But it's
And-
not our money.
And then it shows up, then they can use the system that we're talking about. We come in here and then we're writing checks directly from the school district to JD Sports and all that kind of stuff, and it's controlled by the district. Or be it for me to say this, but maybe the booster organization, the sports booster organization, ought to be managing their own funds. And, they have a secretary or a treasurer or whoever is elected to do that. And they manage the in and out and the checkbooks and all those types of things, and they collect the funds. And it shouldn't be our coaches and it shouldn't be our secretary doing that work.
Well, I would say it this way. We have a budding education foundation, and I can't ever imagine a time that we're going to be asking our personnel to manage their money. I don't see any difference. They're both 501c3s. I can't envision a time when the Daniel Boone School District is going to take the Ed Foundation's money and tell them, well, we'll write this check for you, we'll do this, we'll do that. It's a separate freestanding organization. That's my only concern. I'm not trying to cast aspersions at it, but I do have the commingling of the duties is a concern that I think we need to explore further.
Is that, I mean, trying to name and sell sports boosters and the connotation that that presents, it kind of alludes to the fact that they handle money and they will disperse.
I'm always concerned when you're handling money about impropriety, and I don't want anybody innocently accused of something.
I just said, whenever I hear sports boosters and on top of, everybody knows people know the district.
Right.
Sports boosters does a great
Right.
job, they do this, they do
Absolutely.
that.
It's nothing to do with that. This is really about a process of the business end of this, because you know as well as I do, the minute somebody starts spreading rumors, there's money missing, or there's this or that, let's investigate, it's a problem. And I'm doing this to protect the people, their own integrity, rather than trying to make it a roadblock or a problem for people. Because as soon as $100 or $1,000 or $25,000 or whatever it might be goes missing, people are looking for the criminal.
Well, that's my concern, is that if it goes missing, the boosters right now, at least the sports boosters,
But they're going to blame it the school.
They can point their finger at our personnel and say, wait a minute, you're the one you're the one collecting the money, you're the one dispersing the money. You guys screwed up. And we're sitting there going, wait a minute, we were doing
It's not even our money.
Yeah, it's not even our money. We're just doing you a favor administratively to make your lives easier. And
That's a problem.
And now we're getting sued for it. So
I'm sure it's been that way for 20 years around here.
Yeah, I don't even know if the music boosters do the same thing. I know they have their own treasurer. They order like shoes and supplies, sticks, all that stuff themselves, but I don't know if everything.
You know what they do as a 501c3 is their business. Just like when our Ed Foundation does, starts to get up and running and do their business. That's their business. Because it's not Mark Boyer.
No, it's a valid question, though.
It's not Mark Boyer verifying whether the account is correct, or it's their own personnel doing that.
Well, I know when you were talking last night and you said something about the structure and paying more, and you were paying almost $1,500 in music activities. You were saying that
1 year, right? And I had two
kids there. Yeah. Did you give that to how does the music boosters work? Because we talk about the sports, but the music, it sounds like they're doing the same thing.
You'd be writing a check for, say dry cleaning. You'd be writing a check for they're called dingles. It's a special shoe that they.
But you're writing a check out of what account?
To who?
You're writing it to the music boosters.
Okay, and then they're depositing it in
but I don't
their
know
account.
I don't know what.
But who accounts for that?
It's not coming to the Daniel Boone Area School District.
No, I don't think so. But
who accounts for it, though? Who actually writes it?
If they're writing a check to the district because the district is purchasing something, I don't know how that.
But that's a different thing. If you write that out to the Daniel Boone School District, that for a period of time is our money and it runs through us.
Now,
we're writing it out to Daniel Boone.
The only thing we ever wrote a check to Daniel Boone was for
to the individual team. Whereas I'm not sure if do you write it out to individual, like the color guard, the band.
This is weird.
In that case, it all goes to music boosters.
This is
the only thing
odd.
we write a check for to the school district is for the activity fees.
And I guess
that's how it should be. I think that's how it
So
should be.
yeah, and I don't know who administers your checkbook.
They have a.
Because I know, for example,
Treasurer?
if Connor, you were in a club, if BBYEA sells dish towels with calendars on them, like we used to do back in the day, they collect $20,000 from that fundraising effort. That goes into our district activity account. The kids own it, but we have oversight of that. It's a fiduciary account that we have oversight for. We don't have any fiduciary oversight for any of this stuff.
That's the way sports boosters used to do it until 4 or 5 years ago when the previous athletic director was here. He wanted the individual separate accounts because coaches would bring in bills that needed to be paid, and rather than going through the process, they could give Kathy that receipt. Kathy would write the check to the company and send the check to the company. So that's how that came about. So it's been this way for 4 or 5 years. They used to.
But if I would summarize it this way, right now we're handling somebody else's money.
That's correct.
That's a problem.
That's exactly.
I'm not comfortable with that. I think we're going to need a. I mean, that's beyond tonight's scope.
Yeah, I was going to say let's.
I
that might be
understand,
more of a finance.
but let's put it on the record for the next meeting. I think we need to. We'll administratively start to talk about that.
To say this, it doesn't directly relate to this committee, but that's exactly what we do for the teachers union with the dues collection. But that's a contractual issue. I just wanted to mention that.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't.
We're collecting their money for them.
But again, that there's some controls there. I'm sensing that there's some.
Well, I hope there's.
What we're doing,
Yeah.
it appears to work.
I hope.
But if I say, well, why are we doing this? Well, we always did it that way. That's not a good answer. So I think we need to delve into it a little bit more. But to bring it back to ground zero here,
Okay.
we have a recommendation on the table to take this to the agenda for Monday.
Yes.
So hearing no further, I mean, I don't have any, this is your meeting.
No,
so.
any more comments, questions? Yes.
One question, the proposed $32,000 increase in revenue. Do you want to see that included in the budget?
No.
Okay.
So the budget that we post for Monday will be as is right now, minus any other minor changes.
Right.
Any
All right.
questions from the public more?
Any questions from the public? Any more? No? This meeting is adjourned at 8:05.